Welcome to Series 2, Episode 18. On the show today, I talk to David Bain, founder of Casting Cred, author and video show host. David is one of the people that have inspired me into doing my own podcast, so I owe a lot to him. It was brilliant to talk to him. We discuss audio quality, bursts of air, and plosives. We talk about how he achieved 20,000 downloads per month on his own show, how to blend and repurpose content, hosting virtual summits, and becoming an Amazon best-selling author. Enjoy. Thanks for being a fab listener, and of course, please do subscribe and tell your friends. Welcome to the Johnny Ross Audio Experience. I'm Johnny Ross, founder and digital marketing strategist of Fleek Marketing. Each podcast I'll be bringing you an expert to inspire you, to give you some great business growth takeaways, and to get you thinking about marketing and the bigger picture of how businesses can improve, adapt and grow. I look forward to sharing this with you on each podcast, so here we go. Hi, and welcome to another show. Today we've got David Bain, founder of Casting Cred, an author and online show host. How are you, David?
I'm very good indeed, Johnny. How are you today, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. It's fabulous to have you here. One of the reasons I was just saying this to you a few minutes ago. You've been an inspiration for me to step up my game in terms of podcasting and being on video and live. So it's your fault.
It's all my fault. Lots of things are my fault, but let's not go there.
No, it really is true. I've been on your show a number of times, done a number of things with you, and you've you're always stepping up your professionalism. The stuff that you produce is just amazing, and it's really given me the eyes and sort of the inspiration to do it. So thank you. I mean that.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you on. You're always a great, engaging, intelligent guy to have a conversation with as well.
And I really need to step up my microphone to sort of get to the quality of sound that you have, which we're going to talk about, aren't we? We're going to talk about going from podcasting to publishing a book. And in fact, you've published 2 books. You've been an Amazon bestseller, I think am I right that the podcast that you've done over, I think on your own show, you've done over 200 episodes with 20,000 downloads per month.
Yes, you've got your stats. Stats correct. Yes, that was Digital Marketing Radio, and I put that on pause, to be honest with you, back in 2017, and I've done ad hoc episodes since then. But I've been so busy with other work, with client work, and with producing podcasts for other people, and silly little projects and other things that I had to do. You just can't do everything. But that was a fairly successful show.
Welcome if you are watching or listening. We are live on LinkedIn, we're live on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you're listening, you may be on our podcast. Thanks for being here. If you're with us right now, then feel free to ask David any questions as well. One of the you're putting together this sort of 6 steps to starting a podcast and then going to publishing a book. Just rewinding though. Before we get into that, you did your first podcast in 2006. Is that right? But tell me more about how was that on dial-up or were we on broadband?
The whole internet world was completely different then. That was essentially before Facebook. I think Facebook was just available to a couple of universities back then. So it was before the current version of the internet, really. And even to produce a podcast, it was a lot of effort. And to publish the podcast and get people to listen to the podcast, that was challenging as well, because people just had iPods, if anything. And what they had to do is connect it to their computer and sync with iTunes and download the content from there, and then take their iPod off and listen to it. So it's a much easier task nowadays to actually subscribe and listen to a podcast.
And so when going from that first podcast in 2006, you obviously kept going and you've used lots of different platforms. I think you're quite an early adopter. We were just talking a few minutes ago when you did your digital marketing radio in 2017. You were live streaming on, was it Blab? We said,
yes. So what I did was, because I'd interviewed maybe 100 plus people on my podcast, I wanted to maintain relationships with everyone. I think that, if you are fortunate enough to be able to produce so many podcast episodes, it's important to be able to do that. And one way that I decided to do that was produce an end of year roundup of people's advice and thoughts for the coming year. And I think digital marketing lends itself quite nicely to that kind of topic, because it changes quite often. So at the end of it, I think the initial one was 2015 that I did 2016. So the initial ones maybe had 50 people on, 70 people on over a period of 3 hours or 4 hours or so. And I had people come on every 3, 4, 5 minutes and share their number one actionable tip for the coming year. And it was a great way to maintain that relationship with the people that I'd interviewed, as well as producing new content.
And you had some amazing people on there, some real well-known high-up digital marketeers.
Johnny Ross.
But there was some real top guests. It was brilliant, and you were being noticed, and not only the quality of what you were doing, the quality of the content. You were clearly being noticed, and you were working, and you had some big brands involved as well. You then got SEMrush came along and asked you to do something for them. You did a video series. You were hosting their podcast at one point.
Yes, so I started a podcast for them, and I hosted 2 seasons of that before passing it on. So I hosted about 40 or 50 episodes for them before passing it on to another host. It was a little bit more US-centric, and so that was good. So I've been producing shows for a few people. Content Cow is another brand that Martech, in the Martech arena, that I've been producing shows for. So that's one of the reasons why I stepped back from my own show, and I just didn't have the time and resources to really focus on that all the time.
And you set up Casting Cred, which is a production service for podcast video series. And you were saying that you work in typically MarTech or the legal sector, and so it was clear to you that what was needed, the big gap there, was actually B2B businesses needed somewhere to go to be able to help put podcasts on.
I think B2B lends itself quite nicely to podcasts as a way of producing content for their audience. It's a good way of publishing thought leadership. And if you do that, obviously, it's a great way to get people to engage with your brand and remember your brand. But this was about 2017 or so, I started to have brands approach me and ask me, how do we start a podcast? Can you do this for us? Can you host it for us? Can you produce it for us? And after I had 2 or 3 or 4 brands do that, I thought it was a strong signal to me that I should perhaps be offering this as a service. So I decided to start a brand and publish a website, an agency that essentially offered podcast production services, because I had so many people reaching out to me for that.
This is in no way detrimental. I'm about to say that you have an amazing voice for radio. I don't mean that you don't have a face for TV, but you absolutely no. I really don't. But I think you do have a brilliant, a very, very good voice for really engaging from an audio point of view, and I think that that plays to your strengths as well.
The thing is, you're not born with a radio voice. I think part of that has evolved. I've edited over 500 episodes of me producing a podcast, and you learn to enunciate certain words a little bit more effectively. You learn not to say certain things and how you come across, because coming across to someone online is slightly different to coming across to someone face-to-face. Obviously, the microphone helps. I've got an RE1020 microphone, which is a lovely microphone. I've got it going through a a voice channel, an art voice channel, which effectively adds, this is a little bit high end here, but it's a little bit of compression and a few other trinkets are added to the audio before it goes to a roadcaster, which is an audio interface, and then it goes into StreamYard, where we're producing this video for the live stream. So I do a few things with the audio. So what I'm saying is a combination between learning how to articulate, learning how your voice needs to be slightly different when enunciating, when sharing what needs to be said in a podcast. So you do evolve over time, and you learn what equipment is probably better for your own voice as well. So it's not the kind of thing you're born with. You can certainly evolve and expand your audio skills.
Why do podcasts work so well for B2B? You've got traditional blogging, you've got traditional, all sorts of PR. Why do podcasts? What is it about podcasts that really help engage their audience and turn sort of, potential people into clients?
Well, to begin with, it's how consumers are consuming content. You've got roughly a third of people nowadays that have listened to a podcast or do actively listen to a podcast. So it's a fair chunk of the general public that do consume podcasts. Podcast consumption is skewed towards people that are higher earners and more likely to be into B2B, I guess, or be working for a firm that is perhaps interested in progressing their knowledge of what's going on in their industry. So it's certainly skewed towards the right audience. But B2B, in terms of sales cycles, isn't about an immediate call to action. And podcasts isn't about an immediate call to action either. Podcasts are about building a relationship over time, about hopefully on a weekly basis or a regular basis, providing that content to maintain relationships, to slowly build relationships, so that when people are ready to make a purchase decision, then it's your brand and only your brand that they're going to consider when they're ready to make that purchase.
And it plays on the whole, to some way, I guess, personality marketing, which is around getting to really know the people behind the brand, and people buy from people they like, people they trust, and I guess hearing them, hearing their voice, hearing them talk gets to help you like and start liking and trusting people.
Absolutely. It's an extension to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a way of getting to know the people behind the brand, and it helps people to make that decision as to whether or not it's the type of brand that they want to do business with based upon the ethos of everyone in the organization. And podcasts help to magnify that effect.
Let's get on to the 6 steps. And you're all about starting a podcast, but not just doing a podcast. It's about blending content. It's about repurposing content. It's about having a reason and a bigger part of the strategy. So you're talking about starting a podcast to publishing a book. David, you've got 6 steps. What's the first step?
Yeah, sure. This actually came about retrospectively, because I didn't think beforehand, okay, I'm going to be publishing a book in X number of years' time after I publish a podcast. But looking back in it, I can see the steps, and I can see that it's worthwhile brands considering this as a way to publish different forms of content. Because when you produce content, especially live stream like this, there's an opportunity to do things like produce a podcast out of it and break down the videos into smaller segments to perhaps share on social media afterwards, and perhaps produce a series as well to turn it into something different as well. So I think that in general, brands need to think of their content approach a little bit more coherently, to blend everything together and to make it worthwhile, fully worthwhile, every single piece of content that you're producing, that you really use every aspect of it. Saying that, if you start off doing something like this, live streaming, producing video content, and producing a podcast all in a oneer, the chances are you're going to be fairly average at every aspect of it. So what I tend to recommend is that brands try and get fairly good at individual aspects of producing that content. And so what I recommend in general is, if they're thinking of producing a content series, a video series, then maybe focus in on audio to begin with. Get comfortable at things like talking into a microphone. The microphone, as I've mentioned, that I'm talking into is called an RE20. I reckon that people should actually start off with a microphone called a Samson Q2U, which is another dynamic microphone. So there are two main types of microphones, dynamic and condenser microphones. Dynamic microphones have fairly small sweet spots. So what that means is when you pull back a long way away from it, I'm talking about 6+ inches away from it, they're not going to be very good at picking you up. So you've got to be quite comfortable at being 3 or 4 inches away from the microphone and talking around the microphone and not taking your body away from it too much. So by using that Samson Q2U microphone to begin with, getting comfortable talking around it, and knowing what your content is going to be that you produce, i.e. your show structure, will take a while to take effect. I normally recommend roughly 20 episodes. So producing an audio-only episode using that Samson Q2U microphone, just recording directly into software. You can use another bit of software to have discussions with people online if you want to do that, but get comfortable with the style of content you're producing in audio only form before you move on to video. So step one is a basic audio podcast, and that's generally what I recommend people to start off with.
And coming up with the content for that, where would you start there even?
I would just start with structuring the first 3 episodes. I think that it can be easy to think, okay, if I'm going to produce this podcast every single week, what on earth am I going to discuss? Your show will naturally evolve anyway. No matter how well you plan, you're never going to be able to foresee the style of content that's going to be more appropriate for your brand in episode 100. So to just get started. So decide on what message is likely to engage with your audience, and probably questions are a good point to start, an area to start with. I like the book They Ask You Answer by Marcus Sheridan. It's a really great book for thinking about the typical questions that audiences have about your service. So have a think about typical questions that your audience may have, and intend to answer them over the first 3 episodes, either by yourself or other people in the company, possibly not an interview show to begin with, and just produce that audio content to begin with and get it out there, get feedback, and your show will evolve from there.
So you've come up with the content, you start doing audio using a half decent mic, dynamic mic. Your next step.
The next step is up your audio quality and be more efficient. So what I mean by that is, if you're producing a show, you're probably incorporating things like intros and outros and maybe even sections into what you're producing. So rather than actually just record the main body content, think about producing it as live. I mean, I'm using a piece of equipment called a Rodecaster Pro, so I can add different elements into my audio if I really want to. So I can press a button. Loads of cheers coming out there. But you can add different sections into what you're producing, and you don't do that to begin with, but it's just about being more efficient with your time. So if you can do that at the same time as talking, you're being more efficient, and you're paving the groundwork to being able to actually produce quite a nice live stream show in the future.
What other audio clips have you got in that magic box?
I'm scared of what I'm going to be pressing on here. These are just the standard. There we go.
Fabulous!
I'll have more laughter.
I love it. So you were talking about increasing the quality of audio. You were talking earlier about plosives and bursts of air. Just tell me what a plosive is.
Sure, that's a good point. So, if you're watching this on video, then you'll see that I've got a bit of a cover on top of my microphone. So that helps to stop any sudden bursts of air going into the microphone when I say letters P and B, because naturally, the way that your lip forms when you say those kind of letters, then the air is more likely to come out quickly from your mouth, and that suddenly going to the microphone is actually a little bit uncomfortable when someone listens to that in an audio environment, just with their headphones in, for example. So generally, what you can do to alleviate that is to use some kind of foam cover, or another type of cover in your microphone, and also talk at 45 degrees over your microphone. So you're not talking directly into your microphone, you're just talking over your microphone slightly to improve that. So that's something else that you do in stage 2. You get an understanding of the typical things you need to improve with your voice. Perhaps you say and ah a lot. Perhaps you have these kind of issues with bursts of air. Perhaps you have an issue with your S's. You sound about whistly when you say S's into the microphone. Those kind of things you can improve in stage 2. You don't worry about that when you're getting started, but you evolve that over time.
And as a listener, it can make a huge difference to how engaged you are with that podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I've switched off from great content on podcasts before, just unsubscribed after listening to them for a bit. If there are noises on there that are just horrendous to be listened to on a regular basis. A typical one is if you're talking into a little microphone on a small headset, and you've got a beard, so I'm probably talking to gents here, then it's a horrible noise to listen to, that scrunching of air, of hair, against the microphone.
Yeah, no, totally. It's okay. And in fact, actually, yes, that's exactly what I was going to ask. How do people reduce the use of the word because I'm terrible at it.
There are different types of ers. I mean, obviously, I think one way to begin with is slowing down, is actually embracing silence. A lot of people feel that they need to fill that space. So that's the initial mistake that you need to avoid. You need to embrace silence, understand that 2 or 3 seconds of air, dead air, sounds a lot longer to you than the listener, than the viewer. Secondly, when you're editing, I mentioned that there are different types of ers and ums. There are ers that are completely separate words or separate sounds within the audio wave that you're trying to edit. So they are fairly easy to edit out. But then people will go something like, well, this situation will mean that... So those ers are an integral part of what they're saying, and you just can't edit that out. So don't try and edit out those ers and ums. Try to stop saying them and edit out the ones that are in between words, but don't edit out the ones that are in the middle of words.
And there's some very clever software that can even automatically do some of that for you. Although I'm not sure whether you would use things like that or not, because I'm guessing some of the stuff that you're using is extremely professional.
I use primarily for editing podcasts Adobe Audition. There are great software tools that are up and coming now, but obviously the ideal way of trying to improve things is simply by producing decent quality audio yourself and taking out your ums and ahs yourself. Yeah.
In the first place, which makes sense. Okay, so we've got the content, we've got the audio, we've stepped up the audio to a far better quality. We're reducing the ers, and we're allowing some silence.
We're embracing the silence.
We're embracing it. So, tip number 3. What's the next step?
Step 3 is turn on your camera, but don't go live yet. So, after you've done a podcast and you start using a camera, most people don't really know where to look, or they're uncomfortable looking directly into the camera, especially when their screen is maybe some distance away from the camera as well. They need to get comfortable at looking directly into a camera. You don't need to look into a camera all the time, but when you're starting your content series, it's a great idea to have your intro and to look directly into your camera for the intro, and then you can perhaps have your conversation or do your monologue, and then we're looking to the camera directly for the closing after that as well. And you need to practice that. You're not going to do that naturally as good as you can do with live streaming straight off. So generally what I recommend is that you produce your content in video form as pre-recorded to begin with, because if you do that, you're going to be more comfortable. You're not going to feel stressed. You're not going to feel, you've got lots of people watching, I'm going to trip up over what I'm saying as well. Hopefully you're more comfortable with your audio now, so you can only focus on primarily your video. But do that pre-recorded to begin with. Then you don't have to stress about anything at all. If you say the wrong thing, if you look in the wrong place, then you can re-record. So get comfortable with that to begin with before live streaming.
I've heard some people have put like a little Lego character on the top of their webcam so that it's something to talk to, which I thought was quite a clever idea. I mean, I can't say I've had too much of a problem being able to look at the camera, but I know that for a lot of people it is a struggle, and so I quite liked the idea of a Lego character.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to start out is actually, if you have a webcam, Logitech C920 is probably the best webcam still to start off with, because it's HD, but it's just plug and play, it's USB, really nice webcam to start off with, autofocus as well. Anyway, if you have a webcam on the top of a monitor, then to actually reduce the size of the window that you're using to talk to someone and have them directly just underneath the camera. So then when you're looking at them, you're almost looking to the camera at the same time.
Yeah, that's a very, very clever technique. I like that a lot. Okay, so step 4.
Sure. Live streaming while you record the podcast. So you've got comfortable with your audio, you've got comfortable with producing video. Now you can actually live stream and not think too much of the technology while you're just bringing in one other unpredictable element, which is obviously whether or not the live stream is going to work. You can also obviously probably bring in interaction with the audience, although the audience will come in a little bit later. When you live stream initially, unless you've got a big following, which is unlikely to begin with, then you're going to be live streaming to a man and his dog to begin with. But that's fine. You just need to get comfortable with producing content and talking as you would do in your pre-recorded videos. But when you're live streaming, obviously, you keep on going. If you make a little error, that's not a problem. You can either say it again and cut it out afterwards, or just keep on going if you've just made a small mistake. The other element that I mentioned was engaging with an audience. So if you do find that you get people interacting, then it's great to be able to bring in relevant comments into the conversation. So taking comments from people at the right time and incorporating them into what you're saying if you're having a discussion with someone else. And that's a skill as well, because if you're interviewing someone, you need to listen to what they're saying. You need to hopefully, if they say something interesting or something that requires or deserves a follow-up question, then ask that relevant follow-up question. So you really need to be engaged with what they're saying, but at the same time, you need to see what else other people are saying out there as well, and perhaps incorporate that as part of the conversation. So you're juggling more things as you go along. So that's, again, why I don't recommend doing everything at the same time. Bringing in those key elements, being comfortable looking into the camera, live streaming and not going back, and engaging with an audience are enough things to be thinking of in terms of new. You don't need to be new to using the microphone, new to be using the video camera at the same time.
I mean, you're actually even doing a lot more than a TV host would be doing, because a TV host would have an auto cue, they'd have a producer in their ear, they'd have a researcher, there'd be, and there's probably other roles that I'm not even familiar with, but they'd have so much support. Whereas actually, what you're describing there, if you're running your own podcast or own video series, you're doing a huge amount of work, and it's a lot of skill to be able to do that well.
And you're not trained as a professional. A TV host is trained as a professional to do that, and you're trying to do that, but also the engineering job at the same time.
In fact, they have hair and makeup as well, don't they?
Do you like my rouge today?
We,
Yes.
we don't need that.
We're beautiful already.
We're already beautiful, exactly. But I think it's interesting what you're saying about, that you've got to listen. I mean, how true is that? You can get totally lost if you're an interviewer and you're not listening. You can get totally lost, and it just becomes awkward because you start asking another question when there was clearly another route to have gone down first.
And you're doing a wonderful job of that, Johnny. I think one of the challenges or the things that I don't dislike about many podcasts is they have a script in terms of the questions that they intend to ask, and no matter what the guest says, they just ask the next question, and it's just boring for the listener.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally. So we've got our great content. We've upped our audio. We've gone to camera. We're now doing live. We're looking for interactions. I like your point around if there's a comment, actually only bring it in if it's relevant or if it's at the right time. So don't just get distracted by the comment. But what's the next step with regard to where you'd take it next?
Sure. So this takes me back to about 2015 or so, when I was probably on video regularly for the first time, and I was making great relationships with all these people that I was interviewing, and I just wanted to make sure that I maintain these relationships. And I found a fun way of doing that was to have this end of year show that got 50 plus people on, that was highly engaging at the time. At the time, we were talking about it before we went on air. I used a platform called Blab. Blab unfortunately no longer exists. You can do something similar using different platforms nowadays, using StreamYard, going live to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you want to go live to as well, and getting guests to join you using StreamYard. That's probably a better way to do it nowadays. But back then it was Blab. So I had these 50 or so people on. So what I'm saying is the next step is either to host a virtual summit or to host some kind of larger version of what you're doing, which is hours long, that you can use to maintain the relationships, produce extra incredible content, hopefully for your audience, and just to do something a little bit different that other people aren't doing that's out there.
It's a great way to be able to keep engaging the people that you've been interviewing or speaking with. I think that's really good, and as you say, it turns it into something much bigger. And of course, with more people involved, the natural thing is more people will be aware of it as well.
Yeah, it's a wonderful social thing to do. If you have if you interview a guest a week for a show, you've got 50 or so people that hopefully that you can reach out to again. If you've got half of them that say, yes, I'd like to be involved in something else, that's a massive virtual summit or big live stream that you can do that should be hopefully highly engaging for your audience. But of course, as you alluded to, if you leverage your guests' social platforms, their own audiences, then you can perhaps get them to promote it as well and get a decent audience watching whatever you're producing as well.
What do B2B brands do if they're not predominantly interviewing people? How could they collate content and have some kind of summit, or how do they bring things together once they've done a weekly podcast or weekly series?
Yeah, I mean, they might not be interviewing people. Hopefully, they're still forming relationships with people in other organizations, because obviously I'm talking with a view to producing something like a virtual summit. You don't have to be interviewing people in order to build relationships with people. You can perhaps even just reach out to people to get them to collaborate on a blog post, for instance. So someone reached out to me last week for my opinion on a particular topic to incorporate my thoughts in a blog post as well. The challenge with that is obviously you're not getting a feel for how they present in front of a camera and their audio quality as well. So when you're producing a big virtual summit, then ideally you want to only be inviting people who have great audio quality and look good in front of the camera. Not good physically, but just know what good lighting and good webcam, good internet connection is. So to do that, perhaps you can ask people for little recorded videos to pull them all together for different posts beforehand. So maybe once a quarter, if you're producing a video series on the top 10 tips of a certain topic, you can get people to record, to join you for a pre-recorded call. They've got 2 minutes or so to share a particular tip. It's then a great piece of hero content, pillar content that you can use in your blog as a B2B brand that brings different thought leaders together. You can publish that content perhaps as a podcast, but obviously as a video series, and transcribe it as well for your blog. And then, as I keep on harp on about, you're building those relationships, and then you can decide on which ones of those you're going to reach out to again for your end of your collaboration.
Whilst you're working with some of the B2B firms that you're working with in MarTech and legal, how do you increase their audio and make their video good? Because you're not there, of course. And so how do you fix that? How do you make it better? Because there's having done some similar work before, there's some shocking places that a client thinks to have their laptop and start doing an interview. You're talking about lighting, you're talking about audio. So is that just educating them? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, some clients are. So a Scottish word comes to mind, thran, when it comes to being willing to change. They're unwilling and uncomfortable to change, to accept that actually having a standalone microphone versus a microphone integrated into a computer is a better thing for their audience. They'll say, well, I'll go on a Zoom call and Zoom does an okay job for me. I don't have to wear headphones. I don't have to wear a microphone. So some clients are difficult, and you just have to keep on prodding and getting them to hopefully try a new microphone and wear headphones over time. It does take a little bit of time. So in general, you're better off starting off with that microphone that I recommended, Samsung QTU. I can do decent levels of audio editing, but you can't audio edit a poor quality track to something brilliant. You've got to have something reasonable to start off with. So you've got to have something with low quality background noise, speaking reasonably close to the microphone, and if they're having a discussion panel, please wear headphones. So that's a reasonable start to begin with. You talked a little bit about audio editing. So there's different software out there, and there's Zencaster, there's Squadcast, there's Riverside. They're all platforms that let you do things like record directly on people's computers and then have their audio automatically sent to you afterwards. So if I'm having a discussion panel, I'll make sure that ideally everyone is recorded using their own computer on a separate track. So if there's background noise on certain tracks, I can just mute that track completely while everyone else is talking, and I'm not going to get that in the final version. Too many B2B brands. Before we went on air, Johnny, we talked a little bit about my thoughts on where podcasting was now, and I said a lot of B2B brands were treating it like it was a gimmick and it was 2004 and they were leaving the intern to actually manage podcasts, because back in 2004 brands were just leaving just anyone to produce a website full of silly flashy gifts to represent their brand, and these were brands with multi-million pound turnover, and they were just doing ridiculous things to their brand perception by the quality of their website. B2B brands are doing the same thing with podcasts now. They're producing horrendous quality audio. So as well as actually recording people in separate tracks using decent quality microphones, you also need to adhere to what's called loudness standards, because a lot of podcasts you might have listened to are a lot softer or perhaps louder than other shows as well. So you need to make sure that the standards are good as well. You need to accentuate different aspects of a voice frequency. So if you can emphasize a little bit of treble and perhaps a touch of bass. Not too low, but just a touch of bass. And also, if you do what's called a mid-cut, you take out a tiny bit of the vocal at mid-levels, then if someone's listening in a suboptimal environment, on a bus, on a train, something like that. I know it's less likely nowadays, but you'll get on a train again. And when you listen to audio like that, you really need to take out that rumble noise, that excess of audio that's unrequired, in order to make it much more likely that you can understand and really have a good experience listening to the audio as well. So you can focus on those certain frequencies. You can then do something called compressing the audio as well. So some audio, there's a vast array of difference between the volume, depending on what people are saying. If they're speaking quietly, then the volume goes way down. If they're speaking loudly, the volume goes way up. When you compress the audio, then it actually brings up, it squashes the audio wave. So it brings the high levels down and brings the low levels up a little bit, and then you can amplify the whole track, so it brings up the whole level a little bit. So that's compression of the audio, and there are quite a few other things that I can talk about there as well. So at the end of the day, if a B2B brand is producing its own podcast and it isn't experienced in producing audio, then they're probably going to give the listener a bad experience.
I knew I should have been paying more attention in physics. And it turns out that we're also sound engineers as well.
Yes. Little did you know when you started off your digital marketing journey that this is where it would leave you.
So the sixth and final step, we've got amazing audio, we've got our live video, we're interacting, and we've now just hosted a virtual summit. What's the next step? Publishing the book, is it?
Well, I figured out that by producing an 8-hour summit, summit's a lengthy summit, but it's possible to do, that it actually produces a transcript of roughly 60,000 words. Now, I don't recommend just producing a transcript and publishing that as a book, because the way that people talk isn't the same that the way people write. So you need a lot of editing, but it produces the volume of content that's required for a book. So I've taken live streams before and broken down everything and edited everything and published it as a successful book. And I was going to say that it's an easier way to do it, but it's probably not an easier way to do it, because it takes just as much effort to edit the content and get it in a form that's hopefully a pleasure to read. But it's certainly a way to produce content, and it's something that you can perhaps outsource to other people. And it's a great additional opportunity to harness the content that you've already used.
And you've done 2 of those. We've had Digital Marketing 2017 and the Marketing Now book, both on Amazon.
Absolutely.
And both full of fantastic advice. I mean, even the digital marketing that goes back to 2017. I mean, that's a long time in terms of digital. However, being involved in it and being involved in the show and being aware of the advice and the tips that were given, so much is still relevant. So much of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny actually choosing the names for the books, because the initial one, I called it Digital Marketing 2017, and then there were a few thoughts in my head. Is it digital marketing or is it actually marketing? Is it has digital evolved so that the whole thing is just marketing now? And then I was thinking, okay, marketing now is that a better name for a book? And then someone else said to me that I really appreciated their advice. They said, well, you want a book title where people actually pick up the book in 2 years' time or 3 years' time and they feel it's still relevant to them as well. However, you do get a surge in sales if people feel that it's hyper relevant at that moment in time. So if it's early 2017 and the book is called Digital Marketing 2017, you're going to get a surge of sales. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, the title. It was just an interesting, I guess, perspective and where I was at the time. I think if I was to do it again and I was to have a regular podcast, I would probably incorporate my podcast name into the title of a book as well, just to get better at the branding of things.
And if you were to do it again, would you include a date or not?
I would, yes, I think I would actually, but I would accept that I was going to get a surge in sales, and then possibly quite little after incorporating the book. It depends what you're doing.
But maybe you republish it.
You can republish it, perhaps, but you want it to be hyper relevant as well. And if you can produce the content relatively easily, I know it sounds crazy publishing a book once a year, but I think ideally I'd like to do that and incorporate a year into it. But maybe I'm trying to do too much.
I loved one of the ways of bringing everyone together. You've I don't know if everyone can see, but there's some guitars in the background. You're into music when you have some time, but you actually brought that into your series because you did a musical piece involving everyone, and I thought that was really, you've always got some very creative ideas as well. It worked really well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I was trying to really get loads of people to watch it. I had an issue. I was trying to promote that video on Facebook as well, and Facebook for some reason didn't want it. I think they thought that it was a copyrighted piece of music, but it was actually a song that I produced myself and sang. So I had 134 marketers and incorporated the names of every single marketer as in the song, and I was going to use that as a piece to promote the show, and it worked fairly well. I had about 10,000 people watch it beforehand, which is a decent number. I was aiming for even more, but it's fun and different.
It was very clever. It must have been produced so well, and it was so good that Facebook actually just thought, this is too high production for it not to be a copyright.
Must have been
crazy.
I'll have to do it worse next time.
David, it's been absolutely fascinating. As I said, you've been a true inspiration to me podcasting and being on video, and I'm really just looking forward to some of the quality that you're going to be producing over the next year. You've got some very exciting projects, which, I know we're not to talk about, which is good. There's some nice stuff coming on the horizon, hopefully. But at the same time, you're working heavily with Casting Cred and the B2B brands. If I'm a brand out there that's thinking, okay, you've just described some of our crap podcasts that's going on, or we are thinking of, actually, there's an avenue here. What's the best way to reach out and contact you, David?
Sure. The website's castingcred.com. There's a contact form on there. That's probably the best place if you're a B2B brand thinking of jumping into the podcast or regular live stream situation. Then feel free to reach out. Happy to jump on a video call with you and discuss your requirements as well. Another domain that I'll mention as well is because I'm really happy that I got it, is davidbain.com, because I was trying for decades to get that domain name. Someone else was jumping on it, and I haven't done too much with it. I think I've just forwarded or built a mini site for the Marketing Now book on it, but I'll be doing something with that over the coming years or so.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. If you've been watching or listening, thank you. And please do share this and tell your friends, and join us next time. David, you've been an absolute delight. It's been an honor to have you on the show, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. And thanks so much for taking part.
Pleasure, Johnny. Always great to have conversations with you.
We'll see you all soon. Take care. You've been listening to the Johnny Ross audio experience. Thanks so much for joining me. If you want to continue the conversation, head over to my website, fleek.marketing, or find me on LinkedIn. That's all for today. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, tag me in your social media posts, and please leave me a review on iTunes. It will make a huge difference for me. I will see you soon.